welcome. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm particularly glad to be talking about this topic. And I'd like to tell you a little bit more about myself, and I also want to find out a little about you. I won't ask each of you your name and all of that, but I would like to know a few things. How many of you work in some kind of caregiving situation, however you would describe that, paid or unpaid, that's not important, but some sort of caregiving occupation or situation in your life? Raise your hand if that's true for you. Okay. How many of you, actually, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand because you might be shy about this, but I am guessing that some of you may be here for one of two reasons. Either you have been suffering from what might be or certainly is seasonal affective disorder, or somebody in your family or close group of friends may be in that situation. And I imagine that's true for some of you. So whatever your reason, or just general curiosity about how to get through the Missoula winter, I'm very glad you're here. Let me tell you a couple of things about myself in addition to what Beth said, and then we'll go to tonight's topic. I grew up in Texas, and this little sun charm is a necklace that I wear a lot in the Missoula winters. I am a person who grew up expecting sunshine just as a birthright outside my window every day. But I moved to Missoula to teach at the university in 1976, thinking after the first winter, this is going to be a very short tour of duty, in and out. But that was 31 years ago, and I'm here and happy, and this is home. However, these Missoula winters have been a serious challenge for me. So I'm here tonight as someone who actually has suffered from seasonal affective disorder at various times in my life. I'll call myself a recovering SAD patient, and I'll tell you how I got there. And I'm also a person who loves to lead women's retreats, and one of the ways I cope with our challenges is I take a group of women to Central America every winter. We're leaving next week. So if you're interested in being on my list for next year, let me know, and I'll be happy to send you a flyer. I choose some inspirational theme. This one is the still point of the turning world, and we travel together and have a good time and play and have a workshop, and that's another way that I've devised to make it through these winters. So again, welcome. I'm going to start with something that you may or may not identify with, but let's see if you do. Let's see if you've been having days anything like this. There's no scraper in your car and it just snowed. You get to the gym and no cardio machines are left except the old bike that doesn't work without screeching. Sorry, Barb, that happened to me last night. Somebody from the Women's Club, which I highly recommend. You may have planned on going skiing over the weekend but felt too tired and ended up staying home and just kind of vegging out, and at the end of the weekend wondering, what was I thinking? I didn't do anything that was a lot of fun. Maybe you get home from work and your husband or partner who's agreed to fix dinner is grumpy and resentful and you wish you'd just gotten takeout. You have to work harder because of various projects that may be going on, but you only feel like curling up and sleeping or eating chocolate. Or you realize that when you watched your movie last night, which wasn't very good, you ate 2 bowls of popcorn with butter and too much salt, and then finished up the previously frozen Halloween candy. I actually heard that from somebody yesterday. I didn't do it, but I've thought of it. Or you're thinking about quitting your job, but you don't have the energy to look for another one. Or you'd really like your kids to go live with your mother for a while in Kalispell. So, if so, you've had a series of days that are like the children's book some of you may have read to your kids about Alexander, who had a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. So if you've been having a series of terrible, horrible, no good, very bad days, I wonder if you're suffering somewhat from seasonal depression or seasonal affective disorder. Most people who have SAD know that about November, or for some people about February, they're going to start feeling flat, have a sense of the blahs. There's a sense of just no joy in life. SAD normally is not crippling. It isn't a major depressive disorder, but it's chronic, ongoing, and what I call one of those Joyce Hocker conditions. You don't feel horrible, but you don't feel really good. And almost everyone I've worked with, when I've been trying to diagnose seasonal affective depression, as opposed to something else that might be happening in their life, they'll say, oh yeah, I get this way every November, or I get this way every February. And then I say, well, how long has this been going on? And sometimes people are surprised. We'll kind of go back through the years and they'll say, I'll be darned, I have been having a more difficult time every winter. So let me tell you what seasonal depression is. And it is on a continuum from just kind of the blahs, just not feeling as energetic as one normally does, to something that needs treatment. And I'll go into that. And you can be somewhere on that spectrum. It's not an all or nothing kind of disorder, and it's not a disease. It's not a mental illness. It's a syndrome, completely treatable. And there's a lot of good news about seasonal depression, and I'm going to be sharing all that I know about that with you. Seasonal, I'm going to call it SAD, all right? You know what I'm talking about. SAD is a mild and chronic form of depression that manifests because of a change in light. Now, at least two things happen when our light gets less. Melatonin production is increased. Light decreases the production of the hormone melatonin. Melatonin is used for jet lag, sometimes to reset people's clocks. Melatonin makes us sleepy. Some people take melatonin to help go to sleep at night. Sunlight suppresses the production of melatonin. So I didn't say that right. Sunlight suppresses the production of melatonin. So when the light goes down, we have more melatonin in our bodies, and therefore we're sleepier or logier or more lethargic. Also, sunlight stimulates the production of serotonin, which is one of the 3 neurotransmitters that makes us feel good. It gives us a sense of well-being. Serotonin is a naturally produced chemical produced by the various brain cells that circulates through our bloodstream and makes us have a sense of well-being. You can't take serotonin in a pill. When you take an antidepressant, you are not taking serotonin. It's a more complicated situation than that. So sunlight and other things, which I'm going to talk about, stimulate the production of serotonin so that we feel better. So if you're one of those people who is very light sensitive, then about November, October for some people, or for some people there's a cumulative effect, it takes till February or March, you're going to be just feeling like you're walking through mud or swimming through something, like swimming in a dream and you can't get there. And there are a lot of other metaphors. What might some of the ways of feeling be when you have SAD? I've talked about swimming through mud or slogging through clay. What else do you feel like when you have SAD? Can you think of how you're not always sorrowful. When a person is in a major depressive episode, we're more likely to be actually little SAD, sad or sorrowful. When a person has seasonal depression, we're not necessarily depressed in our feeling and thinking, not crying all the time. It may not be desperately difficult to get out of bed, and we may not feel helpless and hopeless the way we do when we have a major depressive disorder. It's a little different. So seasonal depression really is attached to the condition, to your own bodily condition, and to some extent emotional condition of responding to light and the absence of light. Now here's something that I found fairly horrifying about 15 years ago when I joined the study for the Society for the Study of the Biological Study of Light and Affective Disorders. Missoula, the latitude in which we live, is as bad as Anchorage in terms of diagnoses of seasonal depression. I don't have a statistic about other kinds of depression, but I was very surprised. I thought it got worse the farther north. We're it, folks. In terms of research, we're at a latitude that is as bad as Alaska. Now, we may not have as many cases of severe depression for other reasons as folks in Alaska do, but seasonal affective disorder is a real issue in Montana, especially in western Montana where it's darker. In eastern Montana where the sun shines more, it's a little different. How many of you came here from somewhere else at some point in your life? Okay. Was it a sunnier place? Everybody's going, mm-hmm. Okay, me too, as I said. So these gray, overcast days are a challenge. If you do have SAD, probably you're going to get better on your own at about April, but there might be some things you want to do about it before April in case you don't want to keep feeling the way that you feel. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I'll say a few more things about depression, major depressive disorder versus seasonal affective depression. It's possible to have both at the same time. These can co-occur. One can be in a major depression and be tipped more into depression because of light changes. It's not an either-or situation. So if you are a person who suffers with major depression and are being treated for it or not, you may notice a tip over into a harder time. A lot of people tend to think that it's the holidays, and since I'm in a counselor's office most of my working days, I do know that holidays bring stresses. So if you add the holiday stresses, family issues, rising expectations, some disappointment, and then add in the factor of less mobility for some people because they're not outside as much. If you don't do some sport that you enjoy outside or walk, whether it's cold or not, you may be inside more than usual. And then add to that the lessening light, and you have a perfect situation for SAD. Are there any questions so far about anything I've said before I go into, so what do we do about it? One of the things that I recommend is that if you're being treated for depression with a healthcare professional, that you explore your own pattern to see whether you have a seasonal pattern or whether this is some other situation that you're dealing with. Because as I've said, I've had a lot of people be surprised. Oh, by golly, the last 11 years, when I really think about it, I have had a harder time in the winter than in the summer. So let's think about what we might do. Fortunately, there is a lot that you can do. And I want you to know that I come here tonight partly as a true believer. Back in '88, I participated in a Rocky Mountain symposium for 12 weeks on various weekends on depression, and we were taught a self-care program that had been researched for about a decade by the National Institute for Mental Health. What I'm giving you tonight is my almost 20 years later version of how I have worked with this self-care program through the years with my clients. And also, this is something that I do myself every year. I actually follow the program that I'm going to tell you starting every October. I don't have SAD anymore. I feel terrific these days. If I'm sad, sorrowful, it's because of something that's happened in my life and not because of a chronic biological condition. And I'm certain that the light therapy and the self-care that I've done has taken me out of that category of an SAD person. First, let me say something about light therapy. I'm not highly qualified to tell you all of the biology about this, but you've probably seen people or heard about people using bright lights, have you? Okay, this is typically a 10,000 lux system that is somewhere between 18 and 24 inches from your eyes. The light has to fall on your retina. It does not work through your skin. Tanning booths, forget it, for a lot of health reasons. You may feel better going to a tanning booth, but that's because you like the way your skin looks or you felt warm. It has nothing to do with the light seeping through your pores and biologically doing anything to help you. In fact, it's bad for you. And I hope that if you're tanning that you will consider stopping right away. It's not good for our skin. So the action of bright light therapy is that it must fall on our retina at least a 45-degree angle. It can be from above. You don't have to be staring directly into those bright lights. But most units need to be between 18 and 24 inches in front of your eyes. They've gotten less expensive and portable. You can have desk models, you can have stand-up models. Some companies even have built a little visor into the hat, which I've never seen anybody wear, but looks intriguing and would be kind of fun. There are fold-up models that you can take with you to travel. And the wonderful thing about light therapy is that it's so simple. If it works, it works. You're going to know within 4 to 5 days if you're going to get better and feel better if you're using the bright lights. It's very low risk. There really are no risks except to your credit card for buying a set of lights. So if you do the lights, if you use the lights too long, you'll feel as though you had too much coffee. And then what you do is simply back off. Don't use them as long. Most people need to use the bright lights in the morning. The most effective time to use the lights is in the morning. When I was using them, I'm not any longer, but I did for 5 or 6 years. I had a stand-up model. I put it in front of my exercise bike at home, killing 2 birds with 1 stone, turned on the lights, read the paper, and did my biking for 25 to 30 minutes. So that was very effective for me. A lot of people use a unit on their desk or while they're eating breakfast, or sometimes even when they're working. Have you seen people use the bright lights? Great. This is a very potentially effective treatment for seasonal affective disorder if that's what you have. If you don't have SAD, you're not going to get any benefit from the bright lights. Now, let me say something about full spectrum lights and other kinds of lighting features. They can make you feel good, they look wonderful, they can brighten up your mood. They're not the same thing. So I'm not saying you're wasting your money if you change all your light bulbs every winter, because you may like the effect, but you're not going to be treating yourself for SAD in the way that the light box will. So be clear that there's a difference between the researched 10,000 lux kind of light box system and just changing the lights to make things generally look brighter. That's all I'm really going to say about that, except to answer questions, because I want to spend most of my time tonight on self-care and how to do that. But I highly recommend considering using lights if you're absolutely certain that you have SAD. Now, if you do that, you're probably going to need to use the self-care program too, which I'll talk with you about. But somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes in the morning is good. And I used to sometimes come home from work and do a kind of booster session for between 5 and 10 minutes in the late afternoon or early evening. If you use the lights within 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed, you're likely to have trouble sleeping because that light is suppressing your melatonin. That's what it's for. So you don't want to do that when you want to go to sleep. That's why it's more effective to use the lights in the morning. Let's say this was my light box, only it would be bigger than this. And if I were sitting at my desk, the model would be on a stand, and I would be sitting, and it would be somewhere like this, or some lights are designed so that they can be over your eyes while you're sitting at a desk or a table. And so it's falling on your retina, but you're not staring at it like this. And so it can be sideways or over the top, and that'll work just fine. You can stare into it, but you don't need to. So it's not necessary to do that, and it's kind of uncomfortable, although it is safe. There are UV shields on all of the commercially sold light units. If the sun's out and you're in an office and you can get outside and walk, that's the very best thing you can do, because you're getting exercise and you're getting light. And a little bit of vitamin D, although we're so covered up in the winter that not too much vitamin D gets on our skin. But it's not exactly the same. The light box treatment is more intensive. I'm going to move on to medication and self-care, because I wanted to talk primarily about that. Medication is really important for some people who have seasonal depression. And the way I look at this, now I'm a psychologist, not a psychiatrist or a medical doctor. I see absolutely no reason for treating any form of depression without something like this self-care program, because there's no risk. So if you're a person who is going to need medication, you're going to increase your chances of taking a lower dose for a shorter period of time and having a much less high relapse rate if you do self-care in addition to medication. So the way I look at it, and you may have your own opinions, is that if you're mildly depressed, try the self-care program and or the lights for 3 or 4 weeks. If you're not getting any better or feel worse, of course, see your medical practitioner or do that beforehand. But I can't see any reason to take medication and not do self-care. And do you see why? There's absolutely no risk for self-care except maybe spraining your ankle, but we have that risk falling on the ice. And medication these days is excellent, often very effective, but antidepressant medication is still an art, not a science. Sometimes people have to try several before they find one that works. I think it makes sense to be doing your self-care at the same time. So let me explain the self-care issue. You have a handout. We're certainly not going to go all through it, but I want to tell you the main things that you can do. And would somebody tell me what time it is? Thank you. Okay. The whole point of this self-care program is to increase our ability to enhance our own emotional wellness, to take charge of our own emotional, mental well-being. That doesn't mean you might not want or need therapy, medical help, other kinds of assistance. I believe in all of those things. But what I really have come to understand in all my years working with people is that it's like a three-legged stool. There is sometimes medical help. There's our kind of biological, physiological hand that we were dealt at birth or throughout our life, perhaps illnesses and injuries. And then there's the self-care piece of this three-legged stool. Everybody can benefit from doing some form of this self-care program. So the first thing, you're not going to be surprised at any of this, the first thing we need to start doing to begin to develop what I call great habits on the handout, and you can read this on your own at home, is to begin to exercise if you're not already exercising. Now there's some good news and bad news here. The good news is that for 80% of people with SAD, if you exercise only for 3 to 4 weeks, you will feel significantly better and no longer be diagnosed with SAD. That's exercise only. Now, that's the good news. The kind of bad news is that it needs to be 150 minutes a week. And so that's 5 exercise sessions of 30 minutes or 5 to 6. We used to say 3 to 4, but most people were not getting in enough cardiovascular activity with 3 to 4 sessions. It's possible to break up your exercise into 2 or 3 different times during a day. You don't have to work out all at once. That's not necessary. On some days when I know I'm not going to get to the women's club, I'll go up and down the stairs in my building. I'm on the 3rd floor of a building. And if I do that several times, that may only take me 5 minutes. If I do it several times, it might add up to 10 minutes. And then I can do something else when I get home. So anything you do counts as long as you're slightly elevating your heart rate. You don't have to be panting, gasping, and sweating in order to benefit from exercise. You can take a really brisk walk. And you know a lot about how to enhance your exercise habits, I'm sure. What I do want to tell you is that any habit, any beneficial habit, takes between 6 to 8 weeks to get really set in stone. So it's important to stay with it. Although I can tell you that most people notice a mood change after 15 minutes of exercise. Have you? You get yourself to go out and take a walk or get on the exercise bike or take a little jog or something and you feel better. There's a noticeable rise in your mood. But for your exercise program to actually benefit your SAD, you're going to need to keep at it. And it's going to need to be 150 minutes is the cutoff, the research cutoff for mental and emotional well-being. It's fine if you're doing less than that. Anything is better than nothing. Start somewhere. It's really good to get an exercise buddy or to go somewhere where you feel supported and welcomed. It's just wonderful to exercise with a friend, and keep at it until you build up to where you want to be. Now, there are 2 more components to exercise. I've got all of this on the handout. One is some form of strength training. I'm not just being a physical therapist here or whatever. I spend, this time of year, as a psychologist, I spend a lot of time in my office trying to convince people to exercise. So when somebody comes in to me and I say, do you have a regular exercise program? And they say yes, I say, fantastic. We can get to work on psychological issues. Otherwise, we have to start with exercise because that's where it starts. That's where emotional, mental, physical well-being is grounded, unless you cannot exercise because of a health condition or an injury. So everybody who can, who is physically able, needs to be exercising. If you have SAD, that's your first medication. That is really what you ought to be doing first. I think I've made my point, right? Can I move on? Okay. I'll bet nobody would argue with me about that, at least nobody in this room. Now, the things that are more psychological and less physiological, I've listed on your handout. I've got some lists for you. So I've got a pleasures list, not filled out. That's for you to do. That's your homework. I've got a self-defeating thoughts list, a reducing stressors list, an exercise log, just so that there's no excuse, high accountability, and your social contact log. So when I teach this course, and I sometimes do teach this course over a period of time at the Women's Club or somewhere else, I get people to buddy up, and each week they work with these lists. So there's no way that you have time to fill these out tonight, but I want to give you an idea of what it looks like and how you would do that. First thing is the pleasures. What you do is you take this pleasures list or any other list you want to make. I put mine in the front of my journal, and you think up about 25 things that you really like to do. Now, here are the caveats. Here are the categories. They need to be under your control. And so if a trip to Paris is on your list and that's not under your control, you probably should take it off your list or put it on a wish list or something. But these need to be doable, daily, simple, reasonable pleasures that you're in charge of. Some of them need to have to do with other people, and some of them should be able to be done solo. The reason that some of them need to be solo is you can't always count on other people to be available or to want to do what it is that you want to do. And so if nobody's available to do something that's social on your list, you want to have some things you can do by yourself. Just real quickly, let's brainstorm some pleasures that are simple, doable, affordable, daily, practical, and under your control. Let's just throw out a bunch. I love to soak in a hot bath. Knitting, okay? What else? Playing with your dog. Or for me, sitting in front of our gas fireplace holding my lovey cat. I have a non-lovey cat and a lovey cat. The lovey cat is the one I like to hold in front of the fireplace, and he likes it too. So that's a pleasure. What would be another one? You get the drift. The idea is to make a list of at least 25 pleasures, and then here's the key. Every day do one, and put a date by it on the list. And the cliche that I use is date it, don't rate it. Don't ask yourself, like taking your blood pressure, whether it made you feel better. Just do it. Just do it. This is a cumulative program. You might look at your list and say, absolutely nothing on this list is going to make me feel better. Well, do it anyway. The point is to incorporate these pleasant or used to be pleasant activities into your life rather than prejudging that this is going to be too much trouble or you don't want to or it's not going to help. The idea is just do it. Now, I need usually to add some things onto my list, mark some things off after they've gotten kind of worn out, or I get new ideas and then I'll make a new list. But I keep this list going all winter. And it's a reminder for me to look for these simple pleasures. Here's a simple pleasure that's on my list, having the right kind of Moroccan mint tea that I like to drink at night. No exceptions. That's what I want to drink at night. So having something that you like. It can be a food item as long as it's not, a pound of chocolate. Little squares of dark chocolate are great because they give a lot of punch for not very many calories. And so something small that you like, if it's a food item, fine. This is not a moral issue. This is just some kind of pleasure that you can be in control of. Any questions about this pleasures list? If you're really having trouble thinking of it, it can help to talk to a friend who can say, well, you used to really enjoy such and such. And don't get into a yes, but thing. Yes, but I can't. Yes, but I can't. Yes, but I can't. Just say, oh, yeah, thanks for reminding me. You can call somebody up who knows you and say, okay, I've only got 4. She said I needed to come up with 25. Help me out here. And if the person knows you well and has a sense of humor, she or he will help you out. Now, the next list to make, I'm going to speed up a little bit here because of time, is your stress reduction. This is harder for most people. This is also a list. You don't have to love lists, but you do have to do it. There's a difference between people who got trained to do this self-care program and didn't keep a log and people who kept a log. Guess who did better? The log keepers. Because there's a sense of accountability and also a sense of learning that goes along with it. So it's very important not to just have this in your mind, but to actually be using the lists. I didn't used to be a list keeper until I started doing this. Now I don't mind doing this. Here's the way the stressors work, and you can look at this in your handout. Like the pleasures, what you do is you list, it doesn't have to be 25, but list a bunch of things that pull at your self-esteem, that make you feel worse about yourself, that make you feel negative in some way, the things that you kind of ought to be doing but you're putting off, the procrastinations. But this should not be just your daily work list, your daily to-do list. This should be, that thank you note that somebody sent you a really nice gift at Christmas and you haven't written the note, that sort of thing. Making a phone call that you've put off, getting something for your home or office that you really need. Here's an example. I'm not suffering from SAD right now, but it's going on my stressors list. I'm a therapist, right? I've got 2 offices. I ran out of Kleenex last week. This is a bad thing for a therapist. I haven't gone to the grocery store to stock up on my Kleenex. I need about 6 boxes in my offices. So everybody's scrambling around in their purse and pocket, and I'm looking, it's just pathetic, and I haven't done it yet. So that would go on my stressors list. Not hard, I just need to get myself to the grocery store or wherever and get it. So if your stressor that you're going to put down is huge, that's okay. Put it down. Clean the garage, get a different job, get a divorce, stop drinking. These big things. You can put that down, and you get credit for 20 minutes toward positive action toward this stressor. So if you're going to clean out a closet and you spend 20 minutes, fine. You got your credit for that day, and you put the date down on your stressors list. And so clean out the closet might still be on your list, or take down your Christmas tree, as one of my clients said today. She says, look, Joyce, we're not talking about closets. We're talking about the Christmas tree that's still in my living room. I said, oh, okay. So she's going to get 20 minutes for whatever she does tonight, 20 minutes credit. So don't be afraid to put down the big things. Research towards something, making a phone call toward reducing this stressor. Maybe it's a big, huge family conflict, and that goes on your stressors list. And if you make a couple of calls, or investigate the idea of family therapy, or read a book, or start reading a book, or buy a book, that all counts. So just put the date down by your stressor and keep working at it. Now, why does this work? Doing stressors that have seemed hard gives us a sense of mastery, of control, of not being helpless. And one of the characteristics of depression is that we feel hopeless that things can change and helpless to make a difference. And we have an overall negative sense of things. So these things add up as a self-persuasion tool to help us understand that we can do something about it, even if they're quite small. Any questions so far about pleasures or stressors? Some people say, it depresses me to look at my list of stressors. And I understand that. But as you start doing something toward reducing those stressors, you're going to feel better. I don't want you to make a list of stressors and just stare at it. That would be a bad thing to do. The next item, and I'm rushing here, is social contact. For some people, this is a no-brainer. It's easy. They don't need to work on it. Other people are more isolated, and social contact is more difficult. When we are depressed, SAD or major depression, we tend to isolate ourselves. And so the point of social contact is to bring ourselves out of isolation, and there's a particular reason for this. But first, let me tell you, every day we need to have social contact with somebody outside our family who likes us, okay? Who likes us, whose eyes light up when they see you, who smile at you, who think you're pretty neat. Now, it's fine if that happens in your family life, but it needs to also happen outside your family. This is not just social contact with just anybody. This is the walk toward people who are smiling kind of practical wisdom. If I see Dolly at the club and we have a brief interaction and we smile at each other, that counts, even if we don't talk about problems. This doesn't mean that you're talking about your problems with people. It can be on the phone, it can be on email, it can be writing a note, but some of it should be in person. And it's helpful sometimes to make a list of people that you would like to reach out to, that you would like to hear from, that you are willing to make contact with, and then do that. Another reason this is so important is that, say I'm depressed, seasonally or otherwise. If I see somebody who's positive and who likes me, I'm going to think, well, Barb smiled at me. Maybe I'm not so horrible to be around after all. So it's a way of challenging our negative sense of self when we're around people who like us. It's a way of getting a different kind of feedback instead of that awful spiral that's going on inside that says you're worthless, you're not doing it, you're just blowing it, you might as well stay home, which is the way people feel when we're depressed. So the idea of social contact is not to turn you into some sort of different kind of person, but to pull on the resources of warmth and compassion and care that are around each one of us, unless we're just absolutely new and without friends. And if that's the case, we need to go somewhere where we can begin to speak to people personally. So again, you just put the date by it if you have contact. And the phone and email is okay as long as that's not all you're doing. Phone is better than email. Person is better than phone. It's nice to see somebody's face, to see them smiling at you. I think rather than go through all of the key points on overcoming negative self-talk, I'm going to just point your attention to it. When a person is depressed, we're doing the top half of this list. We're being critical, perfectionistic, demanding of superhuman effort, blaming, condescending. Now this can be self and other. We do that to ourself, the black cloud over us, and we do it to other people. And so what I've suggested, and this comes from cognitive therapy, is that you pay attention to that critical voice in your head and write down some of the most common critical things that you say about yourself. Maybe not out loud, or maybe out loud. And write them down, and then begin to work with yourself or a counselor or a good friend with saying something else about yourself that is positive and also true and positive. I'm not talking about just making affirmations, looking at yourself in the mirror saying, I am the most wonderful person in the world and I can believe in myself utterly. I don't think that does very much good. But if I've been saying to myself, I'm so ashamed of myself, I can't believe I did that, I feel miserable about this, I can't go out in public again, I can't see my friends, it was a terrible faux pas, I can start to challenge my thinking. Well, on the scale of 1 to 10, that was about a 4. It was a little bit embarrassing, but it wasn't terrible, and people have been nice to me since. I bet I'm thinking about it more than they are. So there are some ways of challenging your negative thinking that come primarily from cognitive therapy. So then I've given you a review: exercise, pleasures, reducing stressors, social contact, positive self-talk, and the lists. And I can tell you that most people who start this program have a great time with the pleasures. They usually resist at first, kick and scream for several weeks, and then finally do it. And then they'll start doing the pleasures. The stressors are much harder. Social contact, for some people, not all, is harder. And the negative self-talk may need a therapist's help if you can't do it on your own. A lot of people can do that work on their own, really. That's why this is self-care. So the idea is that if you will do some form of this program for 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes as much as 4, it usually doesn't take that long, if you have SAD, you probably are going to feel significantly better. If you don't, or if you haven't already, you ought to consider seeing your healthcare professional for possible medication or nutritional help, and you should consider using the lights. You can do all of that at the same time, of course, but the self-care is the piece that you really can't afford to do without. This is the must-do. The others are the maybes, depending on your personal situation. Okay, I've got some time for questions, and I want to tell you again that I heartily know that this program works because I've used it and I've explained it to people in my office for 20 years with really good effect. There's good research behind this and good clinical observation. So this is one of those things I can be a cheerleader about. SAD is more common the older we get. And it's particularly common for women in midlife. The hormonal changes that are going on, and also I might say men in midlife, because there are hormonal changes for men as well. But the hormonal midlife changes tend to interact in a fairly nasty way with SAD. So if you're going to have a predisposition to SAD, midlife is a time when you might look for it. And one of the reasons that, just common sense reasons, I don't have research on this, that SAD is so critical for older people is because of lessened mobility and lessened social contact. And so when people are inside all the time and not doing the things they used to do, then they're going to be more prone to SAD. I don't know about adolescents. I wish I did. If somebody does, tell us. But I don't have the research on adolescents. We're all different, and our moods are highly attuned to other people and what we say to ourselves and what we do. We're very complicated human beings, and I think we need to give ourselves the attention and the self-study and the compassion. I say at the end of one of the pages, self-compassion is what makes all of this possible, and believing that we're worth it, believing that we actually are worth our own care makes this possible. Most people in this room, I'll bet, would give excellent care to people we love, and probably have and do, and sometimes we're not on our list. And so the self-care plan is just that, learning to care for the self.